Hi, good evening, and welcome to Community Homeworks Workshop this evening. My name is Jason Byler. I am the Education Manager here at Community Homeworks. We're glad you're joining us. Tonight's workshop is a pre-recorded workshop from last year. We are showing some of our favorite workshops this month while we take a brief break and an intentional and strategic pause to sharpen our axe as an organization and as a team. For this month of May, we are not accepting new applications and we are not doing any live workshops, but we will be back in June of 2022 with new live workshops, and we will accept applications again at that point. So we look forward to seeing you then. If you have questions during tonight's workshop, please put them down in the comment section. We might not be able to answer them in real time, but we will get back to you as soon as we can with those questions and answers. We've got some great shows coming up, and we've got lots more planned for next month. Thank you for joining us tonight, and please comment to let us know if you have questions. Thank you.
Hi, good evening. Welcome to Community Homeworks class on water heater maintenance this evening. My name is Jean, and I am the Education and Volunteer Coordinator here at Community Homeworks. Tonight, our class will be presented by Brett Huckabee, who is our maintenance specialist and does all of our home repairs and makes all the arrangements for all the things that we do for all of our participants. We'd like to remind you that you can type in questions. This is my first time trying to film a class, so please be patient with me as I learn how to turn my camera around so you don't have to look at me all evening. We'd also like to remind you that scrolling across the bottom of the screen are our email address in case you have questions if you watch this video at a later time, or in case you'd like to make a donation. I'm going to try to switch my camera now and introduce you to Brett. And I did it. You guys have no idea how hard that was. It was really very easy. So here's Brett Huckabee, who's going to teach us about water heater maintenance, something you should do on a regular basis to maintain your old or new water heaters. Thank you for doing this presentation tonight, Brett. Go ahead.
No problem. Thanks, Dean. My name is Brett Huckabee. I'm the construction manager here at Community Homeworks, and these guys asked me to go over a water heater maintenance class tonight. So I wanted to discuss a little bit like what is water heater maintenance first, and get into some specifics about what you need to do. Basically, the real reason we do this is to get rid of sediment out of these tank type water heaters like we have here. And later in the class, we'll do a second part that's on demand or tankless water heater. And they have a little bit different problem, which is called scaling. And that's just mineral deposits that build up over time. So it's a bit of a different process. But I thought we'd just go over the tank type first and focus on that. Now, first of all, I thought Jason could show us, if you could pull up that picture 1 of the sediment to see how much sediment you can actually have in a water heater. And I can't see the screen, so.
It's not up yet.
Anyway, give him a second. You would be amazed at how much our water heaters accumulate. And we're supposed to do this every year so that this sediment doesn't collect in the bottom. When it collects in the bottom, it causes problems. You know, you think about it, there's a burner down there in the bottom in this compartment down here. And if you have a bunch of sediment in the bottom of your water heater, that burner just can't get through to heat the water efficiently. So it can cause a number of problems besides just that, but that's really the main thing. Any images? Or are you still on the picture 1?
I'm not going to be able to see them without flipping everything back.
Right. Okay. So anyway, maybe the sediment picture showed, and we'll just move on. So if you go back to the other setting in StreamYard, you can see how that is. Anyway, so let's just take a quick second then to go over tank versus tankless, just so we know what we're talking about. So we're going to try this image thing again, but like I said, we don't have a monitor. So this is picture number 2, that is a tank versus tankless. And if I remember, the version on the right is a tankless, and the one on the left is a tank. So they're very different animals, and we're going to cover those in two different sections. So let's go ahead and begin with the tank. What you want to do first of all is just look over your water heater periodically. This type right here is called a direct vent or power vent water heater. And you might have an older variety that is called a natural draft, that, you know, where it just has an actual pipe that vents the fumes up and out through a chimney. So I'm going to start with this one first of all, because it might be older or they are more prone to issues. You'll always want to look around the unit, make sure all your fittings are dry, there's no leaks or anything. Make sure you understand the difference between your water lines and your gas line. The gas line goes down into the valve, whereas the water lines are on top of the unit. Usually, most water heaters have the inlets on the top. So just really give it a good inspection. With these types, with this natural draft vent, you'll just want to look at the vent, make sure you don't have any really bad corrosion or holes, or if there's a lot of debris on the top of the unit that looks like it's kind of fanning out from this hood here, you might have a condition known as backdrafting. So we're not going to get into that in depth, but just be aware that this vent is extremely important for protecting yourself against carbon monoxide, and to make sure that that thing is functioning properly hooked up to whatever chimney it's going to, and that it's not obstructed in any way.
And this is where it would hook into the chimney, correct?
Yeah, that's
Up
right.
here?
This is just severed off from a job, and normally this would go into like either a masonry chimney or maybe even just a metal pipe that goes on up all the way through the roof. So this just is, the water is heated with gas, and all the fumes it takes to do that go up this pipe and will expel directly outside just with the natural draft of the heat going up. This unit over here, however, is a little different. It's actually got a power fan on it that ejects the fumes while the boiler is heating. So this one's got a little bit different configuration, and you would want to make sure like that this thing's not loose, or that this is all hooked up properly, and it usually goes to the side of your house. So it's also a good idea to look outside and make sure that vent is not obstructed or damaged on the outside. So the other thing we're going to talk about as we go along is this pressure relief valve, but I'll get into that with the tankless because we don't have the proper extension pipe on these. So actually now I'm going to go ahead and move on over to what we need to do to actually flush a water heater. If we could move over here and look at the different supplies we need. Typically you just need a standard garden hose. I recommend having a couple of old towels or rags around, just a screwdriver, usually the flat-headed type, although sometimes you'll need a Phillips head. And then I recommend having a couple, pair of channel locks. You just may or may not need this, but it's just nice to have handy in case. And then a bucket. What I typically do is take the bucket, and before I do anything, and let me just say that there's different ways to do these. We're generally following steps that I do and that I consider the way to do it. Some other plumbers might disagree. I'm not an actual plumber, so this might be more of like a good relationship with us because we're both more laymen in this category. So anyway, normally there's a pipe that extends all the way down, and you would place a bucket under that and give this thing a quick test. When you lift it up, this is called a temperature, pressure, and relief valve, TPR. You'll obviously want to check that for leaks too. It can have leaks here and here, but when you lift this part up, you'll feel it has a little bit of resistance and it'll shoot water out. So what I recommend doing, is taking a towel and draping it off with the pipe running in there, shoot a little bit of water just to make sure this valve, I'm going to say this with a word of caution, sometimes these valves fail when you test them. So be prepared that this thing could start leaking or not turn off properly, in which case you would just want to turn off the water right here. So that's a side note about the one thing. So,
And for that shut-off valve, which way is off and which way is on?
I'll get into that
Okay.
in just a minute. So here we're going to take basically, just to cover that, this if it's straight with the, I get it to turn. If it's straight with the pipe, that means it's on. All these valves are the same. They work the same way. If it's horizontal where it's making a T, that means it's off. So we're going to go ahead and pretend that we're going to do this water heater. It's obviously not hooked up to water, but we're just going to go ahead and what we want to do first is I connect the garden hose to the unit. This unit does not have the hose bib on it. You can see that if these start to leak, you can actually replace them. So let me just jump over to this unit here. And what you do is you'll see that there's actually like a hose type of valve on your unit. It might have a handle on it or it may not. It also might be one that's kind of has a round donut thing around it that you would turn to turn it on and off. I simply take my garden hose, screw it on there, make sure it's nice and tight because remember there's going to be hot water typically. And at this point, I would want to go ahead and run the other end out to outside if you can, if it's downhill, or to a sink, like a utility sink in your basement, or a floor drain if you have an operable floor drain. You'll want to secure this end or even have a helper. If it's in a sink, especially where it might fall out and spray hot water everywhere, it's really important to make sure this end is secured wherever you place it. So it's a good idea to maybe, if it's at a floor drain, like put something heavy on the end of it so it's held down. And if it's in a sink, you might have a helper just kind of help you hold it, or they can tie it off in some fashion so you know it won't slide out of the sink. Obviously, if you go outside, that's the easiest solution, but it really must go downhill. It can't go too far up to go back outside, just to keep that in mind, okay?
So like you can't run it up your basement stairs and expect it to go outside. You can do outside if you're on a slab,
or if it's like in a garage, or maybe you have a first story installation where you can run it out the back door or something like that. So, but typically, in most folks here have their water heater in their basement, may or may not have a floor drain, may or may not have a utility sink. So I know that could be a challenge, but you need a place to discharge that water that's going to allow this tank to drain to some location. And keep in mind, hot water, so be careful. So we've got our supplies together. We've connected our garden hose. I've warned you about securing that hot water end. Now we're going to talk about how do we turn this thing off so the burner doesn't fire while we're trying to do this. We don't want that to happen. If you have an electric water heater, you should have a breaker in your actual panel of your house. So you'll have to go to the electric panel, find the breaker that's labeled water heater, and then shut it off. You literally just switch it to the off position at the electrical panel in your house, and that'll shut off the power to your water heater. If it's not labeled, you look for some of those double breakers that are larger, and that should be a good indication. You'll probably only have a few of those in your panel, and you can just try the one until you get to the water heater. So, and then make sure to label it for the future if you can figure it out. So after you, let's go on to gas things. So for gas, we'll want to go ahead, and there's two different ways to do this. One way is if you look down here, can we get a close up of this? If you just set it to the pilot setting, you don't necessarily need to turn off the gas because it's not going to fire the burner. That's good enough, I think. So you can see that really well. And anyway, normal operation is up to here in this range. If you go all the way to off, if you feel more comfortable turning off the gas, just go all the way to off, and then we'll come back up here, and the valve would have been like this when it was on, and we turn it like a T to turn it off. And it might be hard to turn. You might have some older variety valves. Let's see, I think I have some different pictures.
If that's hard to turn, can you squirt a little WD-40, or should you use slight tap on the handle to try to get it to break free? Or
typically, if you might take your channel locks to it, but I would be very careful. If you have a really hard time turning your valve, you might be better off calling a plumber. If you break that thing, or if something goes wrong while you're fooling with the gas, it can be a major problem. So I wouldn't ever try to force it. I would just try to be gentle, and some of that, some sort of lubrication in there might help. Usually it's the really old valves that get stuck. Um, I think my pictures are going to be kind of hard without being able to see them. So, but I do have some different pictures that we were going to show you guys just so you'd have an idea of what some different gas valves look like. We might post some links to that or something
Right.
later.
If you are unable to see the pictures, we'll ask Jason to put them all at the end, and you can go back. They'll be in the same order as Brett has talked about them.
Yeah, so we're going to show different types of gas valves. If you look at this one that Gene just showed you is pretty common, and it has electronic ignition button where you actually have to manually push it. And whereas like this one over here is just an all electric type valve. And we most of our water heaters have something, it's more modern than this, but it literally just has an on off switch. And so if there's no setting for pilot and it just has an on off switch, just turn it to off and then shut your gas off. Okay. So anyway, let's just move on and not worry about the pictures too much. And so I talked about testing the TPR valve, and I'll cover that with a real one at our other water heater later in the class, okay? That's not essential to for this trying to get the sediment out. It's just a good idea to test this thing periodically. Then let's see, we're going to turn off the cold water supply. So that would be the next step. You want to turn off the water, and remember that's on when it's going up. That's like this. You might have one that looks more like just a regular old hose type that's a round kind. And you might have some different type of lever type shutoff. So if it's a round kind, just turn it like you would a normal garden hose and keep turning it until it shuts off. If it's really hard to turn at the beginning, it could probably use a little persuasion without damaging it. But if it's really stiff, do not force it, because if you break those valves off, it can also be a problem. So if it's really corroded and you can tell it's been leaking and it's just a problem, you'll probably have to call a plumber to have them replace that, would be my advice. However, if you do start to turn it and you get a little bit of a drip, and you can go ahead and turn that thing all the way off, and there's typically a little nut on the actual valve that you can tighten to get rid of that drip. It's a really common thing to happen on water heaters because we don't use that valve very often. So you might get a little drip when you're turning it off and a little drip when you're turning it on. Don't let that freak you out. Just keep going, okay? If it really starts to leak, that's when you might need to tighten up that little nut. Sorry, I don't have an example of that right here, but so anyways, there's lots of different types of shutoff valves, but it should be on the cold water side. You'll see that these are, like this one has a red pipe on the red. It actually says cold water on the top. So this is our cold water supply. So there's normally would be like some sort of a valve just above that part right there. Now the next step you'd want to take is you will want to go to a faucet nearby. We have the water turned off to the unit, so that's not going to have any pressure behind it. You'll want to go to any faucet, a utility sink or a bathroom, kitchen sink, and turn it on the hot water side and just leave that on. You'll get a little bit of water that comes out and then it should stop. So that's a good indication that that you in fact turn the water off to your water heater and that you're ready to go. So open up a faucet, and then we're going to go ahead and start to drain the tank. So this is the next step. You take on this one, this particular valve has a screwdriver type of operation. Like I said, some of them might have a handle. Some of them might have a donut shaped thing that you turn on it. But I'll literally take this screwdriver and put it into the slot. And, this one's actually already been opened, but normally I would turn it counterclockwise, just like you would any hose bib. Now remember, make sure this end is secured wherever it's come out, because this is going to be hot water coming out. So at this point, the water is going to start to drain out, and you literally will probably take a good 20 to 40 minutes for that water to drain out, depending on the size of your unit. If you're draining this unit and at some point you discover that the flow stopped, but I'm pretty sure it's still got water in it, that could be that you in fact have a blockage here in the right here where the valve is. And one thing you can do is take a standard washing machine hose, which will screw onto this end, and then you can screw the other end to like a utility sink faucet or a spigot that allows that. You might have to get some adapters or something, but that way you can back flush the hose, knock any sediment out of the way, unscrew it again, re-secure this end, and then start the process all over again. You might have to do that a few times. If you've got a ton of sediment in the tank, you'd be surprised. It'll clog up the back side of this valve, and it'll seem like your draining stops like maybe within 10 minutes or 15 minutes. Then you've got a problem. So you want to back flush that.
How often should you flush your water heater?
They recommend every year, especially in our area. We have a lot of sediment in our water. It's something that it takes a few minutes. Once you've done it once or twice, you can literally just hook the hose up, turn the stuff off, leave the hose, come back in a little while and do these next steps. And it really doesn't take that long. It really prolongs the life of your water heater for many years to come.
And do you have to drain all the water out, or just,
different people have different debates. Now I'm going for a really thorough flush on this one. Let's say I haven't done it for a while, 3 or 4 years, something like that, and I really want to get this puppy clean. Then I'm going to let all the water drain out completely. And what I'll do then is, this is kind of a trick you can do, is let me make sure I'm on the right step. So then what we're going to do, this is like actually what I consider like the flushing part. So just pretend that this valve is on this tank. What I would do is, once I feel like all the water is pretty well drained out, I can either turn off the valve. I don't even have to turn off the valve, but I would go ahead and turn the water on for a minute and let it, you'll hear it starting to fill the tank up, and it'll be very turbulent. Matter of fact, I think on this unit we can see the inside. You can see that's the hot water side, and back here is the cold water, and it goes right down towards the bottom of the tank. So while it's on, it'll literally be flushing that water straight down right against the bottom of the tank, and it should aid in loosening some of that sediment. At that point, you'll want to drain the water again. So what I did was, I would have probably turned the hose off at the bottom of the tank, flushed it out with the valve on top of the tank. So I would flush this a couple of times, and let it run for a moment. You're not going to hurt anything, and then turn it off again, open up the valve again, let the water drain out, close the valve, open this up. Do that 2 or 3 times. If you're finding that there's a lot of debris coming out. If nothing's coming out the end of your hose, I wouldn't worry about it. I think you've done it enough. So once or twice usually does it. If you have a ton of debris, you might do it 3 or 4 times. There's nothing wrong with that, except for that we're wasting a little bit of water. So at that point, you're pretty much done with the flushing part. And what we would do is come back, make sure you turn this off. First of all, so I'll take my screwdriver, stick it right in that slot, and I'm going to turn it clockwise, and you'll want to keep turning until you feel like it's totally seated and that it stopped turning. So you see how many turns? I'm doing quite a few turns. Oops. And
is it a good indication that if your hot water doesn't last very long, that your tank is probably full of sediment?
It probably just means you have a teenager living with you.
Option B.
But no, it can take a long time for water heat to regenerate when you have a lot of sediment in your tank. So that can be an indication that if you have a long recovery, or if it makes like these popping sounds, you hear it's like pop, 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 these weird popping sounds. Almost sounds like you're making popcorn inside your water heater. That's a sure sign of sediment buildup. So at this point, let me just go back to my list. I closed the drain valve on the hose line, and I can go ahead and turn on the cold water to the tank at this point. So I'm going to this would have been, off, on. I did that a few times. So now I'm turning it on for real. The valve is turned off down below. Matter of fact, I can go ahead and disconnect the hose while this is going on. It's going to take a few minutes. Meanwhile, remember, we left a faucet open at the beginning. When we opened a faucet, either a utility sink or your bathroom sink, kitchen sink, the hot water side should have been on at the very beginning. And what you'll want to do is just let this fill up, and as you hear it filling up, go up and start monitoring that faucet. And basically what I do is just wait until that faucet's like really flowing, like water is coming out and it's gushing water, all the air bubbles have gotten out. And at that point I can turn the faucet off, come back down to the water heater, and we can go ahead and fire it back up. So if you turn the gas off, if the gas was off, we will turn the gas on. If you did turn the gas off, you'll have to come down here and light your pilot light. And every model is different, but this is a Honeywell control, and you normally would push in the pilot. The directions are on here or on your tank somewhere, and you literally just hold that button in for a while, and then you start pushing this button, and you should get an indicator light, and then you'll release once the light comes on, and then you can turn it up to, usually just around A is good. It's about 120 typically, I think. If it's an electronic ignition, it just has a switch here that says on and off. You just turn it on and it'll just fire itself up. So there's nothing to it. You will see there are some older type of valves that I think we'll try to include some of these pictures in somehow. So there's some older valves that have some tricky pilot lighting. That's why I say when we start this process, if you don't feel comfortable lighting your water heater, just set it to pilot and you won't have to worry about it. If you did that and you didn't turn the gas off, you can just turn it right back on
To the temperature
to the temperature you want. Yep. And
Which
then
120 is pretty, the safety level, isn't
that's
it?
safe, yeah. And you don't really want to go too much higher than that just from energy use perspective. Most people find that to be almost scalding hot, but not hot enough to literally burn you very badly. But it definitely can still burn you, so be careful.
Yeah, even at 120, if you have little children, they can get burned with that water.
So once you've got the regular temperature, remember these water heaters are a tank. It's like heating a giant cauldron of water. So it's going to take a good amount of time for that water to heat up. And just don't be surprised if it takes easily an hour to feel like you have hot water back. So anyway, that's pretty much it for the tank water heaters. And if you have any questions or if I missed a step or anything, feel free to ask. You can email us at the link below. And I guess I'm going to pause for just a minute to see if anybody does have any questions. And we're going to move here in just a minute to the tank.
Yeah. Well, as we move, I will flip back and see if there are any questions. Okay.
Okay, so we're going to move on to the tankless on-demand water heater. Don't need the hose. So we can this.
Except now I'm going to screw up. How do I get back?
Save done, maybe.
Hi, we're moving to another location. Hang in there. Okay, we are now looking at the tankless water heater.
Okay, so
Actually, we're looking at Brett, but
this is what we call a tankless or on-demand water heater. There's lots of varieties. This is in Norwich, just all kinds of manufacturers, but they all basically look the same, kind of a box. It's got a really intricate heating coil inside that's basically a bunch of squiggly copper pipes that when the burners hit it, it just gets hot by being inside this unit for the time, and then the hot water just keeps flowing, like it's just constant. So that's why it's called on demand, because it's just when you turn it on, the hot water starts and it won't stop until you turn it off. There's no tank or storage of any kind in this area. It's just piping with like a burner unit inside.
But I find it takes a really long time when you turn your faucet on for hot to come out, much longer than with a tank heater.
Right. Well, it depends. Probably depends on the unit, and it also might depend on where it's located. But typically, you might have a little bit of a lag. But anyway, that's might be in your particular cases.
Everyone I know that has one has a
'Cause I have
large
one.
log.
It's not bad. So we have a GE though. Anyway, what I wanted to go over though is this unit looks really complicated. You look at all these valves and everything. It's like, oh my Lord, you really expect me to do all that? And I just wanted to explain some of the parts. So basically, these are called the supply valves. Like these actually, you see, these are the water pipes. This is the cold. This is the hot. These are the actual water pipes. These little valves are called the service valves, and you see that they kind of connect to this little part with the cap on it. So I'm going to be talking about the water valve or the service valve. Now over here, we actually have a TPR that's, if you could back up maybe a little bit, they can see that pipe, that we actually have a full length pipe here. This is very, very important. If your water heater does not have this pipe on it, get it immediately, because if this fails, it'll blow hot water all over the place, and it's really dangerous. So I like to test these periodically. You just stick it in a bucket. You see I've got just a regular bucket, and I'm just throwing a towel over it because I don't want any hot water to splash up on me. And I'm just gonna be quiet now so you can hear this. That's actually the water heater firing up, but some water came out, and oh, it's kind of nasty, but you see that there's some water there. And sometimes these will keep leaking, so just be patient. This one, it stopped. If it does keep leaking and you tripped it a few times and it keeps going, then that means this thing needs to be replaced, and you should just turn off the water. And they sell these at the, not for all models, but for normal tank water heaters are just available at the hardware store. So pretty easy swap out actually. Anyway, so that's a quick thing about the TPR, or the temperature pressure relief valve. Now we're going to move into actually what they call descaling this thing. So let me get my notes in the right order here. So first of all, let's get our materials together. What you'll want is a 5-gallon bucket. It's very clean. It has to be a clean bucket. A couple of washer machine hoses. They have, this type of fitting on it. This like a normal hose type in. A sump pump that's clean. It can't be like the one from your sump pump and pit in your basement. Okay, this is only going to be used like for this purpose. So it's a little bit of investment, but once you have it, and it just, all this stuff just kind of lives together.
Well, and actually at the big box stores, a lot of them have a whole kit. It comes with the pump, the hoses, and the bucket, and then you can put it all, and you just label it water heater.
And then what you might like to have handy is a couple of, pair of channel locks. You don't need two, just some sort of pliers, because you might have some trouble with some of the caps and that sort of thing. And actually for this demonstration, I don't think we even need the screwdriver. And then just good old household vinegar. It used to say vinegar. This is just it would just be regular household white vinegar. Not apple cider vinegar or anything weird. Just straight up vinegar.
No balsamic. No, you don't want anything other than white vinegar. You can buy a jug this big at Meijer, under $3.
Yeah, and you'll probably, they really recommend at least 3 to 4 gallons of this stuff. So we're actually, for the sake of time, just going to flush this with some water. But normally this bucket would be pretty much full. You pour the vinegar straight into the bucket, and it stinks. You'll have 3 or 4 gallons of vinegar in this bucket, and at that point, you just want to go ahead and get that prepped. And now, what I'm going to do is try to go through this step by step so I don't miss anything. So what you want to do first of all is turn off the unit. So there's a variety of ways to do this. This one actually has an on-off button. So I'm just going to literally turn it off. Give it a few seconds. You hear it's going through some of its machinations. You might even have one that has a cord on it that you can just unplug. So that would be okay too. So turn off your unit. Now you can also turn off the gas just out of extra precaution. Again, I got the valve. It's in line with the pipe. I'll want to turn it to the off position. The next thing you want to do is to turn off the cold water supply and the hot water supply.
And remember, one of them is the water supply.
So back up a little bit so you can see these both. Yep. So we got cold, hot. To go ahead and turn both of those off. These are below these little valves. So they're below that. So I've got both those off. You can see the pipes going right into them. Okay.
And remember that he said if it's in line, it's on. So even though this pipe is going in this direction, this one's going this way. So you are off. If it was down, it would be in line with this. It would be back on.
So at this point, I'm going to take off these caps. And this one has a little plug. That's just a little rubber bit that was in the cap that got stuck on there. So if you see something like that, obviously you got to take that. That one did not have it. It's still inside.
Yeah, it stayed stuck inside. This one stayed stuck in the pipe.
Okay. And at this point, I'm going to go ahead and hook up my cold side to one of these washer hoses. These hoses are not in the greatest shape, so hopefully we can get the thread on. There we go. Whoops. And I'm going to get the hot water. Go ahead and thread it on. Now, people do this different ways, but this is how I do it. So I'm going to take these two hoses, and I'm just going to use that bucket I used for my TPR, and I'm going to go ahead and drain the water heater.
By turning the top valve.
And that's those top service valves. And be careful, the water might be hot if you just used it. And there won't be much water at all. It's really not that much that comes out. There we go. You're hearing it now.
That's one thing about the tankless ones. It means there's no water up there until you ask for water, and then the water comes in.
So it's just about probably less than a quart of water in there. Now at this point, I'm going to switch over. Let me just make sure. So now I'm going to go ahead and push the other ends into the bucket. And what I want to do is place the cold water onto the sump. So here's my bucket of vinegar. You can go ahead and drop the hot water side in just to get it out of your way. And on the cold water, I'm going to hook it to the sump pump. Make sure you got a good fitting. And I'm going to drop that right in there. Now this type of sump pump, it just turns on when I plug it in. So don't plug in your sump pump until you're like ready to actually use it. Okay, so we got the cold water attached to the sump pump. We added the vinegar. Now we're going to turn on the pump, and you literally let it run for like, there's different opinions, but really about 45 minutes is what I've read most common. But I let mine run for an hour. You can let it go for an hour and a half if you have the time. But what will happen at this point, this is really common. See how these hoses are curled up like that? Just make sure that that sucker is in the bucket. You might want to even like figure out a way to make sure these things are straight and going down so you don't have a disaster. If this thing pops out, it'll be pure vinegar shooting all over your basement.
You will have a lovely geyser.
So here I go. I'm going to plug this puppy in. Everything's set. Uh-oh. What's going on? Is there a pump?
And technically your pump should come on.
Yeah, I think we're having technical difficulties with our pump. It's trying to come on. There it goes.
There it goes. Can you hear it?
Now it's flushing. And I can just leave this in here. Maybe I can hook it and make sure it's all secure. And you can go about your business for an hour or so. Just don't forget.
It's a great time to clean your basement.
Oh yeah, and I wanted to say if there's if you're going through this and your unit hasn't been cleaned in a really long time, I would recommend you might even want to switch the vinegar out while you're going along. So about halfway through, if there's a bunch of floating around in your tank, it's probably a good idea to switch the vinegar and keep going.
And what's happening is this pump is sucking the vinegar up through the cold, putting it into the tank, flushing all of those pipes in there, little tubes, and then it's coming back out through the hot water, and the yucky stuff is going back in the bucket. So it keeps getting resucked, which is why he's talking about if it's full of junk, you might want to stop and put some new vinegar in.
So at this point, let's say time has elapsed for about an hour. And what I'll do is I'm going to take this sump pump out of the bucket. Let the water drain out of it.
Unplug it and then take it out.
Yeah. And what I'm going to do right here is there might be a little spillage from this, but then I'm just going to go ahead and remove this side, just the cold water side. If you feel more comfortable, you can go ahead and turn that thing off. So this one's pretty much done for now.
We got to put the little plug back in.
And yeah, we lost our rubber stopper. Thank you. I'm going to shove that in there and go ahead and put this cover back on here. This is just to keep it from getting debris and stuff. It's not going to stop it from leaking out. Oh, well, if I can get her on there, that little rubber bit is causing some problems.
Maybe that's why it was stuck in the pipe.
We'll fool with that later. Anyway, now what you'll notice is I have the cold water off. This one's also off because remember this valve is going this way, so it's off. So what I'm actually going to do, I want to leave that off. However, over here, I'm leaving the hot water on. Now this is just to flush the vinegar that's in the unit out. And can we get a picture maybe just for the little, yeah. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure this hose is secure or hold it. And I'm going to turn on the cold water very slowly. If I can get it to turn. There we go. And I'm just going to run. Now, they say let that run for 5 minutes. So you probably need to dump your bucket. And maybe dump it a couple of times. And you just want to let that run. You see, I don't even have it on all the way, but I can. I can go ahead and crank it all the way on. And just let that run for a while. Now I'm turning it back off.
Our 5 minutes are up.
Yep, the 5 minutes have passed. Probably 2 to 3 buckets. So just, you can stop, I just can, okay, I can go a little more, I can stop. It's very easy. So you're just basically turning on a garden hose to flush this puppy. Yeah. So once that's all completed.
If not, you're taking a vinegar shower.
Yeah, and it's just not good to throw all that through your whole system. So, so at this point, I'll probably go ahead and turn this service valve off. Take the red off. You might get a little drips from it just because these hoses have water in them. It's a bit messy, but this is really important for these units. It'll make you could easily get 15, 20 years out of these if you do this. Really, they recommend it every year and minimum every 2 years.
And these units are very expensive compared to the tank. They're at least double, if not triple, the price of a new tank heater. So you want to take care of it.
Now, before I move any further, there is one special thing that a lot of people might want to skip, but there's a little filter up under here. And there might be some water that comes out with this. And I hope I can get this off without too much trouble. Oops. better if the bucket's underneath it. But you'll see this is this little filter. It's got a rubber gasket on it, so to make sure you don't lose any of the parts that go with this. But you'll see there's a little bit of debris like on this screen. And you would want to take it over to, you can go to a cold water faucet somewhere else in the house and take a little toothbrush and scrub that thing off, or just rinse it to where you know that's clean. So then that filter, just gently line it up, pop it back in there. All these water heaters have this. They might be a different location. It might be over here or sticking out the front. And you just crank it up till it's tight, hand tight. And this is where the channel locks come in. I probably would give this just a little 1/8 turn extra to make sure it's nice and snug. By no means do you want to over tighten that. It's plastic, it'll break. So be very careful. Now we're getting close to the end. So we've cleaned the screen, and what we're ready to do is go ahead and fire this thing up. So I can go ahead and turn on the cold water. I can turn on the hot water. You'll notice I already have this valve is off. And at this point, I should be able to fire the unit up. Oh, I forgot a very important step. Forgive me. What I should do is go over to a hot water faucet, and I'm just going to go into the bathroom here and run the hot water. Just make sure there's no air pockets. I'm going to let that run for a few minutes.
And there may be air in it, and it'll just spit and sputter, and it's fine.
Now I can go ahead and fire this guy up. And we're just going to take a minute, make sure we have hot water. And just keep that running until you hear all that the air is done.
I don't know if you can hear it, but there's some air in there.
That's pretty much the conclusion of it. At the very end, you'll probably just want to come back and just look at your unit, make sure that filter is not leaking. If you feel some drops, wipe it off and feel it again. Make sure there's no drips, because you'll probably have some water from fooling around with this. So don't be alarmed, but just make sure there's nothing dripping. And that's pretty much it for our tankless water heaters.
Thank you, Brett. I know that I had to have help doing my tankless one the first time. We did a lovely vinegar fountain in my basement, made my basement smell like vinegar for almost a year. I'm going to try to switch my camera back and see if there are any questions or any comments that people need help with. Hang on.
Thanks.
All right, we're back. Brett would like to remind you to turn the gas valve back on.
Did not mention that, and I didn't have hot water, and that's why I'm not the professional plumber. But anyway, we got the valve on, and now it's working just fine.
Okay, Jason, are there any questions we need to answer? Let's see, here's one. Except it's so little, I can't read it. The city is putting a new water line in my neighborhood. Should I flush my tankless heater during or after that construction?
Yeah, that's going to be a big problem, I think, for a lot of folks. And here's a step away from this water here. It's kind of noisy. I think that they could. I would recommend just doing that after. Same with water hydrant flushing. When they do those water hydrant flushes, it's a good idea to, do your water heater. Try to time it around that. But it probably wouldn't hurt because you'll get a good bit of sediment. Mostly with the tankless, we're dealing with scaling, which is long-term, like mineral buildup. But certainly, if you notice that your water is discolored and it's been like that for a little while, it wouldn't hurt to go ahead and give it a flush.
Thank you. Anybody else have a question? Oh, here's another one. In my basement, there is a water pit. The water from the washer, softener, etc., drains into it. It is pumped out by the sump pump. If I drain the water heater into it, will the sediment plug up the sump pump and cause other problems?
It's pretty unlikely unless you had a really extreme situation with a lot of sediment. You can also put like a little stocking, like a nylon stocking over the end of the hose that's on the drain end, and tie it off like with a twist tie or something so that it's secured on there, and that'll catch all the sediment from dumping out into any of your drains, really. That's a tip I meant to put in there actually, but yeah, you can tie that little stocking around the end, and also it can show you how much sediment comes out. When you're done, you can flip that stocking inside out and either be like, oh, it's not so bad, or oh my goodness, we better do this every year. It's a really good way to determine how much sediment you're really getting in your heater unit anyway.
And here's another question. When I am going to drain my tank water heater, I turn it to vacation temperature several hours ahead so that I won't have to work with very hot water. Dorothy, that's a great idea.
It's a very good idea. And if you feel like you want to just turn the unit off to do all this, that's fine too. But the vacation setting definitely will keep you from having that scalding hot water coming out when you're trying to deal with draining the tank.
Anyone else have a question?
Or comments.
Or other great tips? If not, I'd like to thank you for watching. Brett and I are here at the office together for the first time in a year and a half.
We're both fully vaccinated, by
and
the way.
we're really happy to see each other and hope that sometime in the near future we'll be able to offer classes in person again. Until then, please watch every Tuesday evening at 6, and we will try to teach you something that we think you need to know.
Don't forget to hit that like button.
Yeah. Brett says, don't forget to hit the like button. Thanks for joining us tonight. Have a great evening and enjoy the weekend. The weather's supposed to be great. Thanks for coming. Bye.
Take care. Bye.